and welcome to Learn Free Music Theory lesson number 26. So today we're going to dive into the world of cadences, and there's really four types that we're going to go over in this video, but we're only going to go in detail for two of them. The other two we're going to kind of just save them until later when we go into higher grades or higher levels of theory. I might cover them down the road if I feel like they are more necessary, but these are the two main types that I really want you guys to be familiar with to first start off with. So we're going to go through the perfect cadence and the plagal cadence today. And don't worry, they're not really that complicated. It's quite simple. So let's get right into it. Alright guys, so today we're going to basically be going over cadences. Now, I already said that in the last clip, so now I guess the question is, what is a cadence and what are they useful for? So cadences are pretty much like punctuation that we would use in English. There might be other languages out there that, I'm not really aware of punctuation in Japanese, or even if it exists or not. But as far as English goes, we have basically three basic sentence marking punctuations. We have exclamation marks, we have periods, and we have question marks. Okay? And we would use those in different situations. Like if we're asking someone a question, we're going to end it with a question mark. If we have an exclamation, we're like, "Did you see the fish that this guy caught?" And we're like, "Ah!" Just going all really loud and whatever, but awkwardness. Okay. So yeah, and there's that, and basically there is periods, and those are more like, statements. So it's like, "I went to the store today. Did you?" Or wait, that would be a question after that. But anyway, yeah. So those are some different punctuations. Now, how they apply is that cadences they're like the punctuation of music. Music is a language in and of itself, and basically, great composers in the past have, realized, if you use this chord function here, it gives this kind of effect, or you use this there, it gives this kind of effect. So, learning how to draw cadences is something that you are expected to do in theory, but it actually has a lot of practical uses. Because one, you can basically, you can analyze your piece. I don't know if that sounds scary or not, but you can look over it and you can see what the composer is trying to do, and then you can think, and you can kind of accent those cadence markings, or do a little bit, or you gain insight into your own piece. Or two, it helps you basically compose, because if you have like a nice melody line and you're like, "Oh, this is great, but I need one of those endings and I'm not sure how to draw it," right? You don't know how to compose it. But if you know cadences, they're pretty quick fix, insert cadence here and you get this effect. So it's quite practical and pretty awesome. So, alright. Now that I've explained that, now we're going to go into what I've drawn back here. You guys have probably been looking it over going, "Okay, when are you going to get to it? When are you going to get to it?" Shut up and just start doing it. Okay, so here we go. So perfect, plagal, imperfect, deceptive. Now these two right here, we're not going to go into detail on how to draw them, but we are going to imperfect and plagal. So basically, perfect is V to I, or that's Roman numerals from 5 to 1. Plagal is 4 to 1. Imperfect is 1 to 5. Notice how it's an inversion of this. So perfect is 5 to 1. Imperfect is 1 to 5. Okay? So they've swapped them. Okay? Now, deceptive is kind of in its own category. It's 5 to 6. And it's sort of like a question. But I think of it kind of like more of a mysterious question. It's kind of like, in Clue, and they're like, "Was it Colonel Mustard in the kitchen with the wrench?" Kind of, it's like dun 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 dun. Okay, but yeah. So yeah, that's deceptive, sort of. I'm gonna explain it probably more in a later lesson. But why it's deceptive is because if you look here, perfect, it's 5. And so the way you usually hear music is when you hear the 5 and it's building up, you expect the 1. It's like dun dun, right? Or it's like dun dun. I'm not sure if that's exactly how deceptive would sound. I can't actually think of it right now at the top of my head. But anyway, so perfect is basically like one of those big epic endings that you'd hear at the end of a big symphony. They don't all have them, but it's a very cliche cadence. So we're going to learn how to draw that. And I like to think of it as kind of an exclamation mark because it's a really kind of big show-offy, awesome finish usually. Okay, now plagal. For some reason, I always think of weddings whenever I hear a plagal cadence. That or church bells or something peaceful and happy, but it's also not like over the top either. Yeah, it's kind of like, one of those like pretty girls with a sundress on and she's smiling and she's holding her hands and she's not saying that much, but you can tell she's pleasant, right? It's happy, but it's not over the top. So that's how I think of plagal cadences. So how I did it is I put a period and then I put a smiley face beside it because that's, I guess, how I see it. And I find it kind of simple to remember it that way. So plagal cadence is 4-1. So notice how in both cases here it's 5-1, and here it's 4-1. So in both cases you're ending on 1. The only thing that changes is which chord you start with, and that leads into the 1. Okay, now imperfect cadence is sort of like a way to keep the piece moving forward. Okay, so an imperfect cadence is 1-5. All right. So composers would usually use this cadence if they're in the middle of a piece and they have Mozart, if he was writing 4 bars and then a cadence. So what composers previously might have done was, if they're it's kind of hard to explain this without going into in depth into like binary and whatever analysis, but and structural form. But basically, if you're in the middle of a piece and it's usually they composed by 4 bar measures, and then at the end of 4 bars or 8 bars they would have a cadence. Now say that was in the middle of the piece and they wanted to move the piece forward, they could pop in an imperfect cadence. So that's usually a cadence you'll see in the middle of a piece, pushing it forward. So it's a cadence point where it stops and then it keeps going. So it's sort of like declaring something, but then there's still more to the story. It'd be kind of like you're telling a scary story and you're like, and he went into the house where the murderer and the ghost and the butcher and an old lady with a stick is waiting for him. I don't know. See, it's declarative, but you're like, the old lady with the stick! No! She's the scariest of them all! But anyway. Okay, so imperfect is that one, 1-5. Deceptive is 5-1. 5-6. It makes you think that you're going... Why do they call it deceptive, I think, this is my own guess, because it kind of makes sense, is that you're on 5 and you're expecting to go to 1, but then they throw you and they give you a 6. And you're like, what? A 6. So yeah, anyway, you can try playing these, on your instruments, whatever you're doing. But yeah, I think we're going to go into those later on. And if you really have a, desire to know the in-depth, details of those, you can probably search them up on like Wikipedia or Google or whatever. Just search like 5-6 deceptive cadence, and there you go. Okay, so I think I've kind of explained the cadences. So hopefully that kind of answers all your questions there. Perfect, plagal, imperfect, deceptive, yeah. So, okay, before we go on to this, I want you guys to write down perfect and plagal, and so 5-1 is a perfect, plagal is 4-1, and then also write down imperfect and deceptive. And I want you to memorize this chart, so you know it, okay? Okay, cool. All right, so that is that part, and now let's move along to the drawing. Okay, so here is how to write a perfect cadence. Now, there's going to be many different ways you can do these cadences, like you can do them in all sorts of time signatures and different beats. Generally, what you want to do, though, is you either want to have them equal beats, or you want to have the start of your cadence come in at the last beat of the measure or the bar, whatever you want to call it, and then your final cadence, or the final chord, happens on the first beat, or the strong beat of the last bar, okay? So basically, the first chord happens right before the bar, and then the last chord happens at the very start of the next bar on the strong beat, and it goes till the end of the bar generally. And that's usually so you get a feeling of dun dun instead of dun dun. I was trying to think. I've never really heard a cadence that way, so I was like, oh, how do you even think of it? Or whatever. But anyway, okay. So perfect cadence. So it's basically starts on the weak beat. Now here, or the way I've drawn it here is it's pretty much just equal. I just gave it a 2/4 time and drew some half notes. But if I wanted to, I could have put it in 2/4 time, and I could have drawn, those as eighth notes, but then I'm kind of too lazy to fill them in. And then I could put a rest in front of them. So that's possible as well. Okay, now, what I've drawn here is just the outline. So, first thing whenever you're drawing a cadence, this is what it helps to imagine. So first draw the chord symbols, the numbers, the numeric thing of what you want to draw. So if you want to draw a perfect cadence, draw 5-1. If you want to draw a plagal cadence, draw 4-1. If you want to draw, whatever, draw the numerical number, and then that gets you in the mindset so you know where you're at. Next step is draw the notes that you're going to associate with each chord. So these are called your chord tones, okay? Now, so how it works is, so say for one example, how do you know what your chord tones are? Okay, well, we're in C major just for easiness sake. I didn't really think that, D flat major would be a great key to do this on. We could, but might confuse some people. Anyway, so yeah, so basically it's just like this. So you take 1, and you're in C major, so you know that 1 is going to be your tonic chord, okay? So what's the first note of the scale? C. Okay, that wasn't so hard, right? Okay, so your tonic note is C. So now what you're going to do is you're going to build your chord on top of that, and in previous lessons we talked about building chords, but just for recapping, a chord, like a major chord, is going to stay pretty much, it's going to be a major third and then minor third. Okay, above that. So from C to E, that is a major third, and E to G is a minor third. Now, if that's too technical for you, what you could even do is think of a piano keyboard and think C, it's on a white note. Now it's going to skip one note and go to E. So it goes C to E, and then it skips another white note for the F and goes to the G. So basically you're just playing note and then skip a note, note, skip a note. And that's pretty much how it goes. But yeah, I mean, so you just basically want to go at the intervals, or you could do it this way. This is another way to think of it, just so you guys have different options. Another way to think of it is that for the first chord tone, right, you know your scale, C major, C, D, E, F, G, right? So all you're going to do is you're going to take the first note, the third note, and the fifth note, and those are your chord tones for the first, so for a tonic chord. So first, third, and fifth. And take those notes and put them in. And then double the 1. So the first note in your chord, double it. So it's C, C, E, G. Instead of C, E, G, we have 2 C's, okay? Now, in the 5 right here, okay? So now 5 is what? So dominant is the 5th, and that is going to be G in C major. So you just take the 5th note in whatever key you're in. This is why it's really important to know your scales, by the way, because if you know your scales, this is like super easy. But if you don't really know them that well, it's like, and you're like counting the semitones, and you're like, So it can be kind of mind-bending if you don't know your scales that well. So it's worth sinking time into practicing and getting knowledge in that area. Okay, so we're on 5 here. Now, so it's G, G, B, D. Now it's the same pattern that we got from this. So it's just take your 5, okay? So 5 is your root, and now go up to the B. So basically you're going to go up to the B. It's just skipping up. So what is B in relation to, B would be the 7th note, and B is the 7th and D is the 2nd. Okay, so again, I'm just skipping. Or you could say that D is the 9th note too, because there's 8 notes from C to C, and then D is the next one, it's the 9th. So it's sort of like you're just going, G is 5, then you go G, G, double the root, then you go B, so that's 7. So you're skipping the note in between, so it's 5, 7, and then you go 9, or 2, whatever you want to say, because you're just back to where you were before, because you go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? You're just repeating over and over again. So I hope that makes sense. Basically, you just take it from the C major scale, and then you just play those notes that go with it. So you go 5, 5, 7, 2, or 9, whatever you want to say. And then C, C, E, G. And that's how you're going to get all your chord tones for pretty much every chord that you ever do. Okay? In all of music theory. Until, yeah, you do higher levels of harmony and then it gets messed up. Okay, anyway. So, now, hopefully I'm not demoralizing you. I guess what I'm trying to do is, I feel like if I say something so absolutely, then people are like, hey, but you said this. And then if I say things too complicated, then people are like, oh, but I don't understand it. You're going too far ahead. So I kind of feel like I'm in like this weird sense because I don't really know who I'm talking to, right? I'm literally just sitting here in a room talking to a camera and I don't know who's going to be watching this. You could be like a theoretician of like master level, or you could be like some random beginner person in another country that barely speaks the language or whatever. And so it's just like, what do I do or what do I say, right? So I'm trying to go all out and across the broad spectrum. Anyway. Okay, so G goes to C. So basically how the perfect cadence works is, again, we go 5 to 1. So what we first want to do is show the 5 to 1 in the bass. That's the very first step. So you take your 5, your dominant, and then you go to your tonic. So, and it's usually going downwards, okay? So it's falling down to the tonic. So it's 5, 1, downwards. So you take your C, you draw it in the bass, you take your G, you draw it in the bass. So that's your bass voice. Now, step 2. By the way, there's 2 styles of writing cadences. One is called chorale style and the other is called keyboard style. And we're doing keyboard style right now because it's easier. Okay? Later on, you learn chorale style. I'm not sure if I'll be teaching that because that's more of like harmony. But we'll see. Okay, so yeah. So now what we have, so step 1, we're going to draw the bass. Now step 2 is we need to find something called the common tone. Now the common tone is basically, after you've drawn in your bass, you should have one note that both the chords share. In every key, you're always going to have this for like a 5 to 1 cadence. So what note is the common note? Well, the common tone in this case is, I've kind of highlighted it by doing a dashed box around it. So we've used G in the bass and C in the bass. So we could just cross those out if we want to. So those are already taken up. Now, if we have G, B, D, and C, E, G, we have a common tone. We have G and G. So how we're going to use that is we're going to write it in the treble clef. Okay? Now, so that's step 2. So basically, step 1, draw in your bass. Step 2, draw in your treble clef. Use your common tone. Okay. Now you have 3 different options to finish off the cadence. Okay? You have 2 remaining keys left, so I have B and D and C and E. Okay? So you're going to take the ones that are kind of the closest together you can get. Like you probably don't want to voice lead B to E, and C to D works okay, but B to E is kind of rough. So you're probably better off going B to C and D to E because they're really close. When you're doing voice leading, the smoother you can get it, the better. So the closer you can get your notes together, the better. Now, what we can do with these 2 notes is there's 3 different options. 1, we can write both above the common tone. So we can write D and C all above. We can write both below, or we can write one on top and one on bottom. So I could go B to C, and I can write D to E below, like this. Okay? Or I can take this B to E, or B to C, and I can write it down below. Okay? Or I could move the D here and the E here. And either one of those is fine. One of the crucial rules in basically cadence writing is that you don't want every single voice moving in the same direction. So you want at least one to either be stable or one to be going in a different direction. So in this case we have one that's stable here and we have one that's going down. So we could have two going up, or we could have two going, down or whatever, because it wouldn't really matter. We have at least one common tone, or we have contrary motion or whatever. So this would actually be a really nice sounding cadence. So if we just added our little stick right here, I know it's not that pretty, but that's okay. There you go. You've got a perfect cadence. So you can write it in those different ways. So step one, so write this down. Step one, you write your bass note in. Step two, you write your common tone. Step three, you can pick three different options. You can write both the remaining notes above the common tone, below the common tone, or one on top and one on the bottom, like above and below the common tone. And always look for the notes that are the closest together for both of them and use those, okay? So like I could have wrote D to C, so I could write like, D to C, and then I could write like B to E. Now that, it might work, but it won't sound as good as if I have D to E and B to C. But some people might argue and say, well, it's kind of boring to do it that way. But that's kind of the way that they kind of teach it in, harmony. And usually when they're doing marking, they dock you marks for being creative. I learned that the hard way. I was like, oh, I don't want this to be boring. I want to learn how to write music. I want to be creative and think outside the box. Well, guess what? If you do that, you don't really learn the basic rules and the foundation, and then you end up getting docked marks, and then you don't really learn one way correctly at all. So it's best to just learn what they teach, and then after then you're free. It's like you're educated enough to know when it's a good idea to use it and when it's not. Okay? So for now, just try to follow those rules and see how they go for you. Now, for the plagal cadence, it's exactly the same concept. Exactly. So basically what you do is the only difference is you'd use 4 here. I had to think for a second, I almost put it on the wrong side. Okay, and then you take your notes. So the 4th note in C major is what? F. So you're going to go F. Oops, I'm holding this the wrong way. F, F, A, C. Okay, so those are your chord tones for that key. So then you'd write an F here, and your C here. Okay, now you've crossed out one of those, and you crossed out one of those. Now, what's the difference? G is no longer your common tone, is it? Nope, it isn't. But you still do have a common tone. C and C are your common tone. So now you put 2 C's above in the treble clef, and now whatever the 2 remaining notes are, you can either put 2 up top, 2 below, or 1 on either side. And there you go. That's cadences. So cadences are basically punctuation marks, and you just throw them in there at the end of phrases. Okay, so what I would like you to do, I guess I'll erase this and drop some homework for you guys next. Okay, so stay tuned. Homework. No. Okay guys, so for your homework, what I'd like you to do is write 10 perfect cadences and 10 plagal cadences, and in each one I want you to try using a different key. So experiment around, and using a circle of fifths will definitely help you. And if you need to, what you can do is say you're doing it in A flat major, for example. So write out a line, like a staff line, so 5 lines, and then go, treble clef or whatever. Then draw out A flat major, so draw from A, A, and then descending, or just you could do it ascending, and then draw in the key signature, and then you can see which notes go with what. So you can see which notes are flatted, which aren't, and then you know, okay, you can look at that and then you can study and draw out your cadence, and then you know what goes with where. Like for example, if you're going like 5 to 1, I think it would be E flat, G, B flat, possibly. I think it would be, yeah, it'd be E flat, G, B flat, or E flat, G, B flat. And then for your tonic, it would be A flat, C, E flat. And that would be your perfect cadence. Those would be your chord tones that you're going to use. Okay? So you could just use those, like basically draw that chart out, and it'll help you for each scale that you go with. And as you do this repeatedly, it'll get more easier, plus you're going to gain more knowledge about the scales that you're drawing. And you'll get faster. Anyway, so that's perfect cadence. Then do plagal, 10 of those, so it's 4 to 1, same idea, okay? Remember those steps, so it's basic, so remember bass, common tone, and then deal with the other 2 notes after. So above, 2 below, or 1 up on either side. And then memorize the first chart that I drew. So try to think, plagal, 5-1, and then go like, imperfect, 1-5, or just repeat them until you know them really, really well. Okay? So that would be your homework for that. And yeah. Okay, so I will see you guys in the next lesson, and I hope that you guys found this lesson helpful, and hopefully you guys understood it and it was clear. I tried my best, but yeah. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Make sure you study hard, and I'll talk to you guys later. Or I'll see you guys later, I guess. Or you'll see me later, and I won't see you, but you can, leave a comment and I'll see that. Okay, anyway, take care. Bye.